Again. All right. Welcome back to the Let's Talk Listening show, episode 2 with Jordan Hales and Coach T, me. Today, I am excited to be in a conversation again with our MC, our moderator, our dancer, our listening student of life, and dear friend, Jordan Hales. So I'm going to turn it over to her because we've got a really cool topic that we're going to dive into today for episode 2. Jordan.
Yes. Hello, Coach T. Hello to all of the people. We're here today, episode 2. Let's talk listening. Just kind of ironic, you don't think about talking about listening, you just think about listening, getting quiet. But I think it's really good. I think we need to start talking about listening. So I'm excited for this. Today's topic is responding versus reacting, which is really cool, really interesting. And also for all of you who are deep in the know about the fact that I am on the listening journey and I'm a student, we're also in week 2 of the Just Listen course.
Yes.
So it's deep. It's deep in these streets, as I like to say. So let's get started. So what do you mean by responding versus reacting, Coach T?
It's a great question because we talk about that even in the listening workshop. In the listening workshop, I break down how we actually listen. And I learned this from my first listening teacher instructor, Dr. Rick Bommelje. And he just completely redefined listening with the acronym SEER, S-I-E-R with an asterisk. And I'm not going to define each of the levels, right? We sense, we talked about that in episode 1, all 5 senses, right? As a message comes in or we're stimulated by something that we see or hear or experience. So we sense, interpret what's going on, evaluate that experience, that listening, the stimulus, the message, and then we respond. And we're going to spend time talking about responding today. If you'd like to learn how to SEER, I would invite you to join the next listening workshop because we break it down in there. But without even understanding how to SEER, how to listen, most of the time we see people reacting to life, reacting to messages that come to them, reacting to events, reacting to their circumstances, which I claim are all neutral, right? So oftentimes what happens is somebody says something and we react. Somebody does something and we react. The news tells us this happened and boom, there's a reaction, right? Rarely, unless we're conscious, are we slowing down to sense, interpret, evaluate, and then respond. So when we're responding to life, we're engaging in this momentary pause of grounding, right? And then choosing an empowered response. So in the course, I often quote Viktor Frankl, right, for saying, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our happiness. So I'm always talking about there's this space. And something can happen, and it can happen really fast, but you don't always have to react to it. I think about literally first responders. You don't see firefighters and paramedics like reacting, like getting to the house, seeing it on fire and being like, oh my gosh, look at that. You don't see that. Do you see that? You see a very there it is. Here's what we've practiced. Here's what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to respond. And we can do that with everything in our life. Right? Kid pees their pants, right? There's a space. Do we react to that or do we respond to that? I have a lot of potty training, reactive versus responsive moments with my 3-year-old. But the point in all of this is there's always that space. Always, always, always. So I feel like that may have been a good foundation for us to dive deeper and hear from you as a student and maybe ask some questions. But how are you reacting or responding to life? That's the question.
Right. And what I hear you saying is that you're responding if you've actually made a very conscious choice.
Correct.
And that you're reacting when it doesn't even feel like you made a choice. And so any choice that you might have made was very unconscious and very habitual.
Correct. It's like,
Yeah.
this is a really horrible example, but it's like if somebody pushes you, you automatically push them back, right? Like a knee jerk, they don't call it, here's your knee jerk response. They call it a knee jerk reaction, right? Because it's like, boom, this happens, here's how I act. And we talk about that in the workshop about the 3 standard reactions, either fight, flight, or freeze, right? Message comes in. Social media is a beautiful example if you want to test your ability to react or respond, right? You scroll and scroll and scroll and see something you don't like, you react to that, right? And it's like, this person said something, I'm going to fight them. Or this person said something, now I'm afraid of them. Or this person said that, and I am so shocked, like I freeze, I'm frozen, I can't move. But if we're in a space of responding, anything can come towards us, any circumstance, anything. And we can pause and choose the most empowered response. But we can't do that if we're not conscious or if we're knee-jerk reacting to things. So just knowing that there is always a space, even if it's like a half a second, that's incredibly empowering. And that allows us to, like, you'll see me implement, I call it the Bambi rule all the time. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, right? So because if I want to respond, I've got those core questions. Is what I'm about to say or show kind? Is it loving? Is it even useful? Right? Will it add value? If not, there's nothing to say, there's nothing to show, there's nothing to do, just be.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have to react to everything.
We really don't. And there's so many good things that you said here. The first that I wanted to highlight is the space of responding. And now my brain is like visualizing, like standing on, like, the little TED circles where they stand on the red circle. And so like, this is the responding space versus this is the reacting space. And I'm like, oh, well, how do I create a little responding space, And what goes into creating a space of responding? Because you talk about creating your listenings, right? So there's a lot of connection here between creation. So talk about creating a space of responding.
Yeah. So when I talk about creating a space of responding, I really like to root into the facts, right? And there's the fact about the number of thoughts that we have per day as an average human being. I consider us all above average, but on average, we have up to 60,000 thoughts a day. 60,000. And of those thoughts, it was the National Science Foundation who discovered this. 80% of those thoughts are negative. 80% of our thoughts are negative. 95% of our thoughts are repetitive. So not only are you playing these negative listenings in your head, thoughts, right? You're repeating them. So knowing that is incredibly empowering, because that knowing allows us to create a space. Because if I can see that these trains of thought are going to be passing and they're going to be negative and I might repeat them, I cannot have to try to like change them like a Pollyanna, like just like try to put in I can just let them pass by like trains, like clouds. And I can kind of step out of that. The seeing the thoughts going past, that's creating space. That's creating space. So if I'm going to react, I know I'm only reacting to my thinking that I've listened to consciously or unconsciously, and that caused me to fight, flight, or freeze, right? But in any given moment, if I'm slowing down my thinking, I can see, okay, this happened. What am I sensing, right? I don't listen, I sear, sense, interpret, evaluate, and now I will respond. Because these negative, repetitive thoughts are completely normal. Completely normal. I don't have to buy into them. I can just let them pass by. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I think, one of the things that's come up in the class time and time again is whether or not listening is useful or non-useful. You know a lot. And I like combining this with this idea of trains, because trains are moving and they're moving in a direction. And then the question is, and in what direction are they moving?
Yeah.
Is the actual destination that you're looking to move towards,
Right.
you know? And I think that's been one of the most helpful things for me, because okay, let me tell you, Coach T has got us writing down all of our listenings that are non-useful this week, right? So we have to slow down enough to not only recognize it, but to also write it down. And what's interesting to me and how it has changed my thinking is that I'm writing down the non-useful listening, and then I'm giving myself to a space to say, is this useful towards, and then I have to fill in the blank, right? Like when you're talking about elements of usefulness, it's or non-useful, it's in relationship to something greater.
Right.
So talk about being grounded or not grounded in something greater, because I think that affects whether or not we react or respond.
Yeah. So what I love about what you're bringing up in terms of we create this space to see like, okay, here come the thoughts, the trains, the useful versus non-useful listenings. And you're absolutely right. They lead us somewhere. One of my clients literally said, I have trains that take me to Negativeville, USA. And I was like, I'm writing that down because I love that because it's true, right? If you look up and you see you're heading towards someplace you don't want to be, well, that's when you know, like, okay, let's get out of this train. Let's take a step back. Was this a reactive train that led me to this place that has nothing to do with who I am, who I want to be, what I want to create? I think it's a very empowering place to come from, right? So back to your question, remind me of it, not because I wasn't listening, but because I want to make sure I actually answer it.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think if I even remember the question at this point, but I want to talk about what is the usefulness of being grounded in something greater, right?
Yes.
In order to help you to respond versus react.
Perfect. So we could look at this a couple different ways. So if I wake up every morning and I know what my purpose is for the day, even if it's just to be a good mother, right? Like if I'm clear about my purpose today is to be the best mom that I can be, right? Then going back to the potty training example, right? If my child has an accident and I'm grounded and remembering who I am as a really great mom, then my trains of thought that go by that are like, gosh, when is he going to figure this out? Right? Like, or come on, like, I don't want to clean this up. Right? Those thoughts are, again, repetitive, negative, like that is totally normal. So I'm at a point where I can let those trains pass and I can remember I'm a wonderful mother. I'm a loving mother, right? Those are useful listenings. I was like, let's get on that train. Where does this lead? It's okay, buddy. You just had an accident. That's a response that's grounded in who I truly am as a loving mom, right? But if I'm not committed to being a loving mom, then I might just be reacting to everything that happens. So to your point, I want to be grounded in who I choose to be every single day. And that will help you decide which trains of thought you want to ride or listen to, right? But that grounding is really important because you ground when you get into that space between the thing happening and you either reacting or responding. You know you're responding if it's in alignment with who you want to be and who you truly are. And I love also saying, it's like, is what am I about to say kind? Is it useful? Is it necessary? Is it even like, is it going to add any value? But the real kicker is also, will this be a response that I'm proud of, not just in this moment, but in the future? Because sometimes we're like, oh yes, this is the right thing to do. And it might feel right in the moment, and give it 48 hours and you're kind of like, right? So if we can get to a place where we're grounded in the truth of who we really are and who we want to be and know where we're headed, then we can choose a more empowering response. It's like, Christians who literally go, what would Jesus do? Like that's a form of, okay, how would Jesus respond to this? But if you're reacting, you miss the space in between the stimulus and response where you can literally say, what would Jesus do?
Right.
That's one way,
Right.
and then we practice, right? So it's not about being like, gosh, why am I so reactive all the time? It's like, no, the fact that you're seeing that you're reactive all the time is step one. Like, congratulations, you're in the game. Like, the fact that you can even see that you're reacting tells me you're on the path and you can do this.
Well, and I think that's really important because some varying people are reactive for different reasons. Like your underlying biology, can affect the degree to which you are reactive or responsive, right? If you have any anxieties going on, any PTSD or anything like that. A lot of people in those spaces, they talk about being triggered or getting triggered, right? Which is, I think, also a great visual to understand what's happening when a reaction happens, right? Or it could be about just who you've been around, the people that you've been around, or the culture that you've been around can help to either support reactive postures or more responsive postures, right? Or just the environment, like being around, soothing music. I got up this morning and put on some cool music. I'm just like, what's really soothing music for the morning, and I had, a much better time than I would have if I didn't put on any music, and so it's important that we know that. But, with me, I'm a very reactive person at this point, or as one of our teachers say, until today.
Up until now, yes. Until today.
And I think it's important that I don't react then to my reactions, right?
Yeah.
By saying, do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. It's like, I'm so mad. I'm mad that I reacted this way, and I'm mad that I reacted this way, right? So it's this, it's the slowing down to say, like, you know what, take it easy. You know what I mean? Like, this is actually really good. So you can be like, wow, I can't believe I did that again, right? And actually not beat yourself up for it. And that's a whole nother conversation for a whole different episode of the Let's Talk Listening show, because you're seeing, like, there's layers to this, and you want to get really good at catching yourself in a loving way, not a way that beats yourself up like, gosh, when am I going to get this down? It's like, you're not, like, when I talk about being a master coach and instructor, when I even just use that word mastery, the master knows they're forever the student. And the only thing they're trying to do is just get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better than who they previously were, not anybody else. So mastery becomes about noticing when you're beating yourself up for not executing the practice and letting yourself off the hook, right? And, you just keep going. You just keep getting better. So that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay. So there's two things. I have so many things. Every time you talk, I just want to go in all these different directions.
But I forgot to set the recording. So, like, the timer. So I don't even know how long we've been talking.
Well, let's get the people this one piece that I think is critical. All right. So up until now, we've been talking about responding and reacting on an individual level, which I think is critical, because how you are responding or reacting as an individual is quite possibly the thing that is most within your control, right?
Yes.
But also,
it is.
All right, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it is. And what I was going to say was the fact that you turned on, like, really soothing, like, good music, like, that was a form of creating your listening this morning. Like, you legit chose your playlist because you knew that what you were feeding yourself in the form of music was going to literally impact your molecular structure, right? Something else we've talked about. So where I was going with this was, on an individual basis, it can be fun to practice. Like, I know I lightly talked about scrolling through social media. Do that as an exercise to see yourself get triggered. What's your initial reaction when you see, the ad for Donald Trump, or where you see the ad for Joe Biden, or you see the ad for, like, just what's your reaction? Like, that's a way for you to wake up to the 60,000 that are passing by and not make them mean anything, because they're normal. they're negative, and they're repetitive. So it's like, I can be at peace with this now. So that's like the social media challenge, is like, go through, and it doesn't have to be politics. It's just an easy example, right? Because it's very triggering right now. And it's like, leaving the daycare, finding out, President Trump had COVID. It's like, boom, watch the thoughts, watch the trains, watch them. And like, you don't have to take the bait. Just watch them go by. Watch them. That's that creating the space. Huh?
Mm-hmm. I like the way you said that. I like the way that you framed it, is like, you don't have to take the bait, because sometimes it is a bait.
That's all it is.
Like, either one part of yourself that's advocating for you to stay the same is trying to bait you, or in some cases, when it comes to like media and politicians, they are trying to bait you into feeling a particular way, into going down a particular train, but you still get to choose. You get to respond.
Correct. It was like I'm in a little family text with my brother and sister. And after the debate, they were like, what'd you think of the debate? And I just wrote back, it was interesting. That was my response. And then here comes my brother. Nothing more than interesting? Like, that's the only adjective you could think of? Like, that was his reaction, right? And then I just said, PG-13, right? Because I had a moment where my daughter came in to the room when I was watching it, and she's like, who are these people? And as the best mother, right? A loving, there we go, grounding, like, who am I as a mom? My child does not need, this is me. She doesn't need to see this. What I was witnessing. Not at 5. Right? So that was my next response, PG-13. It's not good for children. So I say that kind of jokingly a little bit, but as individuals, if you get into the habit or the practice of watching the thoughts that go by first, they're typically the ego thoughts, right? When you settle down, you'll see more useful thoughts pass by, right? Like the truth of who we really are, that peaceful, loving, calm place that's in all of us. So that's on the individual level. So challenge number 1, scroll through social media just to see what you got going on and your trains of thought. And then just know that there's always a space. And what is your truest response, right? When you settle down, because it's always going to be different. And if you're willing, you'll know the response that's kind, that's loving, that's useful, that's necessary, or even helpful. And if nothing comes up, then there's nothing to say or show or do. And that is the path to creating greater connections with people, more peace and harmony, right? And that's how we play this game. But it comes from listening to yourself and these thoughts that are going by, not taking the bait, grounding in who you are and who you desire to be, and then responding from that place. And it's for sure a practice. So let's talk about organizations.
This is so good. Okay, so we're going to take it up. So the first step is we practice listening to ourselves, right?
Yes, because that's the only person you're listening to anyway. Like, you might think you're listening to somebody else, but it's like, you got all this stuff going on. Like, let's talk about that first.
Then second, I want people to realize, because I think it's important, that we also listen in group, and we either react or respond in group, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about organizations.
Yes.
Right?
Group think, that's a fun one. I witnessed this a lot working with groups who were selecting advertisements, for example, and watching maybe the one person say, I like option A because of XYZ. And then all of a sudden, I like A2, I like A2, I like A2, right? And there's this group think that's natural and that can happen within an organization pretty easily. And then the other thing that you'll find, if an organization isn't intentional about diversity and creating a space where there are people who have differing viewpoints and perspectives, right? What you'll see is if you have everybody sitting around the table that's the same age, ethnicity, etc., they are often going to think the same way. right? It's like going into a church and asking all of them what they think about a particular stance, and they're all going to say the same thing because they're all in the same faith, right? So from an organizational perspective and responding, it goes back to, what are you grounded in? Like, what are your organization's values? What's your purpose? Why are you here? What do you stand for? And then from that place, most organizations will choose a response that is in integrity with those values. Organizations get in trouble when they start reacting and then they wake up and realize, this is way out of who we are. Like, this is not who I want to be, who we are as a company, who we are as a nonprofit, or whatever, an organization. So it's the same thing, but it's about, what are those values? What is your mission? What is your purpose? And how you are responding or reacting. It's just kind of checking that with your grounding and what you're rooted in.
Right. I've had so many realizations here, that I've had this internal battle, about activism, because I'm an activist. And what I realize is that in the activist space, what many activists and organizers have been calling for is for us to react together. And what I really want to do is for us to respond together.
Yes.
That's what I want. I want that collective responsiveness and very deliberate choice versus collective reaction. And we can get into that later, but I thank you for that realization.
But it speaks to the times, right? Like, the meaning, and time is the word, right? Like, it speaks, like, people create stories about the amount of time it takes somebody to respond to something, right? People create stories around there being a lack of time, and we have to say something now. We have to do something now. And it's like, there's a really unnecessary, non-useful listening or belief around time. Okay. I remember, I don't even know where I saw this, but it was probably somebody on my social media feed, when the murder of George Floyd happened. Somebody had said something like, Oprah hasn't said anything. Oprah hasn't done, like, we haven't heard. And this is just something that I read. I couldn't even tell you who said it, where it was. But what was the point of this person's post was, people were all worried about what she was going to say, what she was going to show, what she was going to think. And she was over here responding, mobilizing a town hall of sorts with people from all different, authors, activists, and like bringing them on to talk about that moment. So that's responsive leadership, if you ask me, and not caring, not listening to the pressures and the people forcing someone to react.
Yeah.
Right? Because
go ahead.
No, you go.
I'm just realizing that many times when people are asking, how do you feel about that? What they're really asking is, what's your reaction? They're really not asking what your response is when it comes to those key moments, where something has popped off, as they say. They really are asking for your reaction and not your response.
True. And because the feeling is really only rooted in a listening. And we talk about that. Like, our feelings are really inherent, like they're the byproduct of a thought, right? So if I'm feeling really happy about something, what am I thinking? Because the same circumstance can happen to everybody. And I talk about this, right? Like, it's about to be raining here in Florida, right? The rain falls on everybody, right? And you might think, oh my gosh, I love that it's raining. When it rains, it's just like time for me to read a book and like cozy up. And I just love the sound of rain, and the plants, like, they've just needed this drink for so long. Like, this is so wonderful. And then someone else could be like, oh, it's raining. I hate this. Like, doom and gloom. Like, the circumstance is completely neutral, but your feeling is coming from how you think. So if somebody's like, how do you feel about this? Typically when people ask me how I feel, I pause. And if I have a certain feeling, like, oh, I feel sad about that, I might not speak, I feel sad. I will speak in my mind, I'm feeling sad. Well, what's the thinking that's causing the sadness? And my response is typically something like, I think it's really unfortunate that and that makes me sad. That's a response versus like, this is just so sad, right? That's two completely ways of being in the world. That's two completely different energies that you bring into an interaction with somebody. And that can create two completely different responses in the other person. Does this make sense? So when we talk about productive conversation, or we talk about creating from our listening, that's what I'm talking about. Like you having the ability to tune into, oh, this person asked me how I feel. Okay. What am I thinking? That's a richer and more powerful response versus just talking about how you feel. That's a reaction. And you said that
And you
first.
see, I have to slightly disagree here, and let me tell you why I slightly disagree. So I'm a habitual thinker.
Yes.
I'm very much so here, and I disconnect from my body and my feelings. So for me personally, to actually tune into my truest feelings, not maybe the reactive feeling, is a more whole body, like connective experience for me. So I had to say that because, whew, boy, this denial of feelings is real. It is real. It's a form of my listening, you know. And I don't think you're actually talking about denying that experience, but for anybody that might be reactive like me and listen to it, you know, like that, I just wanted to like
because that's normal. Like, I'm not kidding. Like when we talk about 80% negative, reactive, 95% repetitive, the reactivity comes from a repetitive habitual thought or an automatic negative thought or an ant, right? That's all that's happening. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's totally normal. So it's like, I want people to start to see that this way in which they think, or the maybe in how they cut themselves off from their feelings, which is also very normal because we don't exactly live in a society that teaches people how to feel their feelings, right? And not numb them or ignore it and go like look at social media or distract themselves or check out. No, it's like you check in, that's where your power comes from every time. You might not feel it now and you might want to react, but your awareness about that is where your power is going to come from. Because when you dip in, your truth is going to come out and it's not going to be wobbly. And like, do I really think or feel that?
Not a wobbly truth, Coach T.
Wobbly truth, right? Do I, don't I don't know, right?
You know, because I'm glad you brought up Donald and his current health. And
President Trump and his health. Yeah.
Yes.
Lots of reactions.
Lots of reactions. And I'm thinking about the collective response, which ultimately is the cultural response when, you know, there's so many people who have a feeling about something. And my guess is that the majority of us are reacting right now to him. You know, versus
regardless of whom you support, right? There's a reaction on every side.
That's right. Yeah. And you know, that's important because you can react to things not only that you dislike, but you can also, I mean, I don't like it, but you can also react to things that you like.
Yeah.
Right? Like just an habitual like moving toward, you know, which is also it's not a response.
Correct.
You know, but what I want to talk about with you is the bigger picture with teaching all of us how to listen. And what do you think could happen if we built a larger culture?
If we built a listening culture?
We built a deep listening culture and a deep responding culture.
Oh, for sure. More peace, more connection, more, you know, I always talk about within the workshop and within like the Just Listen class or when I coach in other programs. And people say, you know, why would I want to listen? I can tell you the cost of listening, right? And it's like the inverse, the opposite of the cost. So when we don't listen, we lose credibility, we lose trust, we lose relationships, we lose love, we lose intimacy, we lose money, we lose lives when we don't listen. I don't have to give a real world example because there's plenty of them in this moment. Okay. We lose when we don't listen. So to your question, what do we gain? Everything. More connection with self, God, and others, right? More intimacy, more trust. Because when you speak and communicate from a place that's grounded, like we talked about, people trust that. People can also sense wobbly. And notice I didn't say see, I said sense, which is part of the deeper listening work, right? So we create everything that we want when we start to truly deeply listen. So if we had a culture that listened and didn't react to the things that they saw, instant connection. In one of the listening workshops, there was a woman who shared, and it was so beautiful because I literally asked everybody, what does it cost you not to listen to this person or this group that you're deeply, like vehemently, like I can't, I won't, right? What is it costing you? Because we don't think about the cost of not listening. And it was so beautiful because she said, it's costing me a friendship and a relationship, because she was so fearful because of this other person's political views that she didn't even want to be around them, because she was afraid that, and this is all like projection, like afraid that this conversation would come up and then there'd be an argument or whatever. It was like, this is costing me a dear friendship. So when people wake up to what a lack of listening and a habitual reacting is actually creating in their lives, and they start to see that, then they're kind of like, okay, maybe I'll start listening to this listening stuff, because it creates everything that you could want: love, trust, respect, money, right? For people who are in businesses that listen actually are more profitable than those who don't, right? They just are.
Say it again.
If you're in business and you're not listening to your customers, or you're not listening to your employees, or you're not listening to your board or your right, you're not going to be profitable. So when I talk about prosperity and listening, I don't just mean money. I mean prosperity in every sense of the word. So if you want a better relationship with your spouse, learn how to listen. Not hear, but listen. And learn how listen. Seer involves responding. You start responding to people, you're going to be dumbfounded when you stop reacting, right, with their response, because you have a different response, they have a different response. It can't not happen. So when we stop wanting other people to change and we change how we respond to life, your entire world changes from that insight alone. That feels like a good stopping point, does it not? Before episode 3.
Well, thank you, Coach T. I learned something here today. I learned so many things. Thank you for talking to us about responding versus reacting.
Yeah.
What's coming up next in your world?
We do have the listening workshop, amongst some other things. The next workshop, Train, leaves the station on Saturday, October 10th. That is a complimentary course. Jordan's taken it a couple times. And that's really where you get access to a lot of the things that we talked about today. I teach you how to listen. We break down SEER, and we really go into different areas of your life with which listening could create more of what you want and less of what you don't. So that's October 10th from 10 o'clock Eastern to 12 o'clock, 10 to 12. It's a 2-hour workshop. It is via Zoom, so it's an online class. You come for those 2 hours, you show up, you get on camera. We don't use the chat box. We learn how to listen, okay? Got to be on your camera. I got to be able to see you, because you're going to learn why seeing is a part of listening. And that's the next journey. So if you're interested in that, I will post the link to register for the next listening workshop below this video, wherever you're accessing this video. And if you're watching this after this episode of Let's Talk Listening, just send an email to Teresa at herlifeherlegacy.com, THERESA at herlegacy, all one word, .com, and I'll send you the information for the next workshop, which will most likely be in November or December. So any other questions, thoughts?
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Jordan. I'm going to see how we did on time here. And no, we're not going to edit this because we like to keep it real. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.